My name is Emma Carson, 20 years old, from Overland Park, Kansas. I always knew something about my life felt borrowed. No baby pictures, no birth stories, just a perfectly curated family in a perfectly quiet Kansas suburb. But when I found a shoebox in the attic labeled Grace, everything shattered. Turns out, the people who raised me weren't my real parents, they were my kidnappers, and the truth, it was only the beginning. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. This isn't just a story about lies, it's about identity, betrayal, and the moment everything you believe about your family comes crashing down. Now, let's begin. Growing up in Overland Park, everything looked perfect on the outside. Our lawn was always mowed, our porch light flicked on at exactly 6 p.m., and we never missed a church picnic or parent-teacher conference. My mom, Carol, was the kind of woman who baked casseroles for grieving neighbors and decorated the mailbox for every holiday. My dad, Rick, coached Little League and smiled with his entire face when someone thanked him for fixing their fence. To the rest of the neighborhood, we were a Norman Rockwell painting. A model family, but me? I always felt like a sketch penciled in after the canvas had dried. It was little things at first, things that kids notice but don't understand. Like how every photo album was filled with pictures of my younger brother, Cody, from the moment he was born. There were snapshots of his first tooth, his first steps, his first birthday party with a clown that made balloon animals. My section of the album started when I was about 3. There were no photos of me in the hospital, no baby shower cards, no ultrasound images stuck to the fridge like his. I asked once. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging my legs. I must have been 6 or 7, where's the pictures of me when I was a baby? Carol froze at the sink. Just for a second. Then she smiled like it was nothing. We lost a lot of them when we moved. Remember the basement flood? But we'd lived in that house since I was 2. I remembered every corner of it. Another time, in 5th grade, I brought home a family tree assignment. I was excited, until I asked Rick what hospital I was born in. He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. Pretty sure it was St. Luke's. That's where we had Cody too, so it makes sense, right? Pretty sure? Sure. Definitely. St. Luke's. He was lying. I could feel it in my bones, even back then. Still, I buried the feeling. I mean, what else could I do? They were my parents. Cody was my brother. We had movie nights, inside jokes, Christmas mornings. Maybe I was just overthinking it, but the feeling never left. When I hit my teens, I started noticing other things. How Carol would stare at me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, really stare, like she was trying to remember something. How Rick would deflect anytime someone asked about our family history. When we went to the DMV to get my learner's permit, he got flustered filling out my paperwork, couldn't remember my blood type. Said the records were a mess. At school, friends would joke that I was adopted because I looked nothing like my family. Cody had sandy blonde hair and Carol's sharp chin. I had dark curls and eyes that didn't match anyone. I laughed with them, of course, but deep down, I wondered, because even in a house that looked picture perfect, I always felt like a photo taped in from someone else's album. It was the winter of my sophomore year, and I had come home from KU for Christmas break. Carol had strung up the same red and gold garland she used every year, and the scent of pine-scented candles lingered in every room like a memory too strong to erase. Cody was out with friends, Rick was watching a bowl game downstairs, and Carol had asked me to help dig out the holiday decorations from the attic. That attic had always unsettled me, not because it was dark or dusty, but because it felt like a room frozen in time. Old baby clothes, mismatched luggage, broken ornaments. Every box had some label in Carol's tidy handwriting. Cody, 2nd grade, Christmas lights 2015, Easter decor. I reached behind a stack of board games and pulled out a faded shoebox shoved into the far corner. It was labeled, oddly, in all capital letters, Grace. I frowned. There was no Grace in our family. No cousin or old pet with that name. Just the 3 of us, Carol, Rick, Cody, and me. Or so I thought, curiosity pushed harder than caution. I opened the box. Inside were folded documents, brittle from age. A worn hospital wristband. A yellowed envelope. And at the very bottom, a newspaper clipping. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Baby girl abducted from Wichita Hospital, March 2002. Below the headline was a grainy photo, a swaddled newborn, wrapped in a pink blanket, her face barely visible but familiar. Her name, Grace Lynn Walters, age, 3 weeks, status, missing. Last seen, Wichita General Hospital, suspected abduction. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed the hospital wristband next. It read Baby Walters, March 12, 2002. My birthday. But not the name I'd always known. Not Emma. I dug deeper into the box. There was a short letter, and signed, typed on thin paper, "She'll be safe with us. She'll never know. No one ever needs to find out." The floor seemed to shift under me. My hands turned clammy. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wasn't imagining things all these years. The weird looks, the missing photos, the awkward silences. This box wasn't just proof that something was off, it was proof I didn't belong. I wasn't Emma Carson, I was Grace Walters. I stumbled back, clutching the box like it might vanish if I let go. My mind raced with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Why me? Who took me? Did my real parents ever stop looking? I heard footsteps downstairs. Carol calling my name to help with the lights, but I couldn't go down there. Not now. Not with the weight of this box in my arms and a truth too heavy to carry alone. Everything in that attic had dust on it, except the box. That box had been opened recently, which meant someone, probably both of them, knew I'd eventually find it, and maybe they were waiting. I locked the bedroom door behind me and set the box down like it might explode. I needed to see. I pulled up the article again, scanned every blurry photo, then stood in front of the mirror. Same hairline. Same soft cleft in the chin. And there it was, the clincher, a faint birthmark just beneath my left ear. The same one visible in the baby photo from the newspaper clipping. I touched it like it might burn. I was Grace Lynn Walters. I was the baby in that photo. I was the girl abducted from a hospital crib 20 years ago. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. My body, a shell. My identity, ripped at the seams. Carol and Rick didn't lose my baby photos. They never had any. They weren't my parents. Not legally. Not truthfully. And now I was staring into the eyes of someone I didn't even recognize in my own reflection. I sat on the floor for what felt like an hour, numb and shaking, the shoebox beside me like some cursed Pandora's vault. The longer I stared at it, the more rage began to stir beneath the disbelief. I'd asked them before. I'd given them chances to tell me the truth, and they chose lies. I didn't knock when I came downstairs. I just walked into the kitchen, holding the box in both hands like a weapon. Carol was frosting cookies at the counter. Rick sat at the table, sipping coffee, watching the game play silently on the tiny kitchen TV. They both looked up as I entered. Carol smiled, but it faltered fast. "What's that?" she asked too quickly. I dropped the box on the table. The newspaper clipping slid out. Rick stared at it. His face went pale. "You want to try this again?" I asked, my voice flat and shaking. Carol's eyes filled with tears almost immediately. "Emma, my name is Grace." Silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Rick put his coffee down. "We were going to tell you. We just didn't know how." "You were never going to tell me," I snapped. "You've had this box for years. You kept it hidden." Carol stepped forward, hands trembling. "You don't understand. You were left, Grace. No one came back. We found you in the hospital hallway, wrapped in a blanket. You were alone." "That's not what the article says," I said, my voice rising. "It says I was taken. You didn't rescue me. You stole me." Carol sobbed harder. "We loved you. We gave you a life. You are our daughter." "No," I said. "I was your secret. Rick looked like he wanted to say something. But he didn't. Coward, I backed away from them, blood pounding in my ears. I'm going to the police. Carol gasped. You wouldn't, watch me. As I stormed out, I looked back one last time. The faces I once called Mom and Dad, now just strangers cowering behind a lie. The mirror had never lied, but they had. Every single day, I didn't stop to pack a bag, I didn't grab my phone charger or coat. Just the shoebox, my wallet, and my keys. The cold hit me like a slap the moment I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. My limbs moved on instinct, like they didn't trust my brain to make decisions anymore. I drove in silence through the winding suburban streets, every streetlight slicing across my windshield like a spotlight. My thoughts were loud, screaming, really, but my body stayed quiet. I had to. If I let one emotion crack the surface, I'd shatter. The Johnson County Police Department was only 10 minutes away. I parked crooked in a visitor spot and carried the box like it was full of explosives. It was late, just after 10 p.m., but the fluorescent lights inside the lobby made it feel like noon. A tired-looking officer at the front desk glanced up. Can I help you? My name is Emma Carson, I said. But I think I was kidnapped as a baby. And I have proof. That got his attention. He called for a detective immediately. Within 10 minutes, I was in a sterile room with gray walls and a glass window that didn't reflect, just watched. Detective Ramirez, a woman in her late 40s with calm eyes and no visible reaction, took the box from me gently. I need you to walk me through everything, she said. So I did. I told her about the strange childhood moments I never questioned. About the box in the attic. The newspaper article. The wristband. The letter. I even showed her the faded birthmark under my ear. She asked questions. Never rushing, never letting me spiral. She was precise, professional, but when I paused to catch my breath, I caught her glancing at the article again, her jaw tight. I remember this case, she said quietly. The Walters baby. It went cold after a year. Parents were devastated. They're still alive? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. They live in Wichita. We'll contact them once we verify the evidence. Ramirez ordered a DNA test right then. She swabbed my cheek and sealed it in an evidence bag like it was sacred. It would take a few days, but I could already feel it in my bones. I didn't need a lab to confirm what I saw in that mirror. I wasn't Emma Carson, I was Gracelyn Walters, and my life had been a lie. We're going to reopen the case, Ramirez said as she escorted me out. You did the right thing coming in. Did I? I wasn't sure, because the right thing still felt like the end of something. Like burning the only house you've ever lived in, even if the foundation was poisoned. I sat in my car outside the station, hands on the wheel, breath fogging the glass. The streetlights buzzed above me. All I could think was, what happens when the truth finally arrives, and you don't know who you are anymore? They cried the moment they saw me. Andrew and Melissa Walters stood on the porch of a modest brick home on the west side of Wichita, their faces both familiar and foreign. Melissa covered her mouth like she was afraid I might vanish. Andrew stepped forward slowly, like any sudden movement might break the spell. Grace. Melissa whispered. My God. It's really you. I tried to smile. I really did. But all I could manage was a stiff nod. Hi. They pulled me into a hug that was more overwhelming than comforting. I let them. Their arms wrapped around me like a memory I didn't have, tight and trembling. Full of grief and something like joy. Inside, their living room was warm and filled with family photos. Frames lined the fireplace, shelves, even the hallway. I noticed immediately, there were no recent pictures of kids. Just one small frame with a photo of a newborn, me, frozen in time. The same photo from the article. Melissa made tea. Andrew asked if I remembered anything. I shook my head. I was 3 weeks old, I said. There's nothing to remember. They exchanged a look I couldn't read. Melissa sat beside me on the couch, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. Not a single day went by that we didn't think of you. We never stopped hoping. I believe you, I said softly, and I did. I just didn't feel anything, that was the problem. They showed me my old nursery, now a quiet guest room. Andrew pulled out a box labeled Grace's things, baby clothes, a knit blanket, hospital tags. They spoke to me like they already knew me. Like I was supposed to just fit back into their world, but I didn't. I couldn't. The truth was, these people were my biological parents. But they were also strangers. I didn't know how Melissa took her coffee. I didn't know what Andrew did when he was angry or how he laughed when something really caught him off guard. They didn't know my favorite song or that I still had a fear of thunderstorms. They had 20 years of love to give me. But I didn't have the history to receive it. At one point, Melissa brought out a photo album labeled Missing You. Page after page was filled with birthdays I never attended, Christmas trees without me, cakes with my name written in frosting, each one like a ghost of what should have been. I had to excuse myself and go sit on the porch. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I looked up at the stars, trying to ground myself, trying to find some piece of me that belonged here. But all I felt was grief. Not just for what I lost, but for what they lost too. I had found my real family, but I didn't feel found. I felt like a puzzle piece that almost fit. Almost, and almost hurt more than being lost ever did. It started with a local news segment. The headline crawled across the screen while I was still in Wichita. Wichita baby abduction case reopened. Now a grown woman returns home. I didn't watch it live. Melissa had the TV on, but I walked out of the room before the anchor even spoke. I couldn't bear to hear my name, Grace Walters, said aloud like a breaking headline. Like I was something discovered in a field instead of a girl caught between two shattered lives. By the next morning, the story had exploded. Every outlet in Kansas City picked it up. Some national stations too. They showed the newspaper clipping I'd found in the attic and zoomed in on my childhood photos next to my baby picture, pointing out how I'd mysteriously reappeared 20 years after vanishing. Reporters staked out my childhood home in Overland Park. A swarm of cameras surrounded the driveway. Microphones angled toward the door like weapons. Carol and Rick, no longer mom and dad in any sense, appeared only once, blurry and nervous, slipping into the back of a police cruiser at dawn. They were arrested on charges of felony kidnapping, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The mugshots were all over the internet by noon, but the one person I kept searching for in the footage wasn't them. It was Cody. He wasn't in the background. He wasn't standing in the yard or answering questions. He'd vanished from the narrative, just like I had all those years ago, until he called me. I stared at the caller ID for a long time before answering. Part of me didn't want to hear the heartbreak in his voice. The other part needed to. Emma? He said, his voice low, almost scared. Or Grace? I don't know what to call you. Call me whatever feels right. There was silence, then a sigh that sounded like it came from somewhere deeper than his lungs. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. You just disappeared. Then I see our parents on TV in handcuffs. They're not our parents, I said softly. Not really. They raised you, he snapped. They raised us. I don't know who the hell you are right now. I bit my lip. I'm still me. But I couldn't pretend anymore. Not after what I found. Another pause. He was trying not to cry. I could feel it through the line. I don't know what to think, he finally said. I don't think I ever will. The call ended with a click, and that was it. Cody, my brother, my only real anchor to the life I'd known, was gone too. The scandal burned through our town like a prairie fire. Neighbors whispered. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with rehearsed sympathy or thinly disguised curiosity, but all I felt was hollow. The people who raised me were criminals, the people who lost me were strangers, and the person I thought I was, didn't exist anymore. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not physically, but emotionally. Sterile. Hollow. As if even the walls didn't want to absorb what was about to be said. I sat in the front row of the gallery, just a few feet behind the prosecution's table, staring straight ahead. They entered in handcuffs, Carol and Rick. I hadn't seen them in weeks, not since the night I left with that box in my arms. But there they were, wrists shackled, eyes sunken, dressed in bland county-issued jumpsuits. Carol's hair was pulled back tight, her face pale. Rick looked older, smaller somehow, like the guilt had eaten a hole in his spine. Neither of them looked at me, the courtroom murmured with reporters and townspeople. I could hear them whispering things like I used to carpool with her, and he built our back deck. To the community, they'd been good neighbors. Churchgoers. Volunteers. But that was the thing about suburban Kansas, it's a place that keeps its secrets tucked neatly behind hedges and forced smiles. The judge called the room to order. The first hearing began, prosecutors presented the DNA results, conclusive. I was Gracelyn Walters, 99.9% match to Melissa and Andrew Walters. Then came the timeline, the article, the forged documents Carol and Rick had used to register me for school, get my social security number, open bank accounts. Every piece laid out like kindling. Their lawyer tried to spin it. Claimed they found me abandoned, that they feared the system would fail me. He even said they raised her with love and stability. He used words like rescue, desperation, and fear, but none of it could explain the secrecy. The lies. The forged paperwork. The fact that they hid the truth for 20 years, even when I asked. Especially when I asked. At one point, the prosecutor asked to admit the letter found in the shoebox, the one typed without a signature. She'll be safe with us. She'll never know. No one ever needs to find out. Carol looked away. Rick stared at the floor, the air in the room seemed to disappear. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. My voice trembled, but I didn't let it break. I don't know who I am anymore. Not fully. But I know who I'm not. I'm not the girl you pretended I was. You built a life for me out of stolen bricks, and I had to tear it down with my bare hands. That's not love. That's control. That's fear. Carol cried quietly. Rick still didn't look up, they didn't respond. They weren't allowed to. And honestly, I didn't want them to. Nothing they could say would make it right. Outside the courthouse. Cameras waited. I ignored them. This wasn't about public opinion, it wasn't about headlines, it was about facing the people who made me believe I was someone I never truly was, and finally, watching them be held accountable. The verdict came on a Monday, guilty. Carol and Rick were convicted of felony kidnapping, fraud, and obstruction of justice. They didn't cry when the sentence was read, 10 years each. No appeal. No special leniency. Just the cold clang of justice coming far too late. I should have felt closure. Relief. Something like peace, but I didn't. I sat outside the courthouse afterward, ignoring the press swarming the steps. Microphones thrust forward like weapons, reporters shouting questions. Do you forgive them? What do you say to victims of identity theft? How does it feel to finally know who you are? I didn't have answers for any of them. Inside, I was still floating. Not high, not lifted, just unmoored. The Walters tried to give me space, but Melissa called often. Andrew emailed photos from when I was a baby, scanned pages from journals they kept during the years I was missing. I appreciated it, truly. But every word, every memory, made the hole inside me bigger. Because I couldn't remember any of it. How do you grieve a childhood you never had? And then there was Cody. For weeks after the verdict, I heard nothing. No texts. No calls. Just silence, stretched too thin. I tried to tell myself he needed space, that he was just as shattered as I was. But the silence hurt worse than the noise, until one morning, a letter arrived, no return address. Inside was a single page in Cody's handwriting, Emma, or Grace, I guess. I don't really know how to start this, so I'll just say what I can. I feel like the world flipped upside down. You were my sister. My best friend. The one person who always looked out for me. And now I'm being told it was all a lie. I don't know what to do with that. I'm angry. I'm confused. But I'm not angry at you. I miss you. I just need time. Maybe one day we'll talk, and it'll feel normal again. I don't know, but I hope you're okay. Really, Cody, I cried for a long time after that, not because of what he said, but because he still called me his sister. It was the one thread of my old life that hadn't been completely severed. The media storm died down eventually. A few podcast requests lingered. A documentary team reached out. I said no to all of it. I wasn't ready to let the world turn my trauma into entertainment. I barely understood it myself. At night, I stared at the ceiling in my tiny apartment, caught between two versions of myself: Emma, the girl who lived a lie, and Grace, the girl who never got a chance to live at all. The truth had saved me, but it had also broken me wide open. The paperwork came through on a cloudy Friday morning. I stood in the county clerk's office, the smell of dust and old printer ink surrounding me, and watched the woman behind the glass window stamp the final form. "Name change approved," she said, sliding it across the counter. "You're officially Gracelyn Walters." Just like that, a name taken from me when I was too young to speak it. Now returned, I left the building with the certificate clutched tightly in my hand. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. The grief had already done its damage. What I felt now was something quieter. Not peace. Not joy, but wholeness. That afternoon, I drove back to the neighborhood in Overland Park where I'd grown up. It felt smaller than I remembered. The trees were bare, the cul-de-sac empty. The Carson house, or what used to be the Carson house, stood silent at the end of the block, a for sale sign staked in the front lawn. The shutters were faded. The porch swing was gone. So were the welcome mat and the potted plants Carol always kept by the door. It didn't look like home anymore. I parked across the street and sat there for a few minutes, watching the wind rustle the brittle grass. It was strange how something so familiar could suddenly feel like a museum exhibit, an artifact from a life I no longer belonged to. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked up to the sidewalk and stood at the edge of the lawn. My eyes drifted to the upstairs window that used to be mine. Behind that glass, I once scribbled poems in a notebook. I cried into my pillow after breakups. I stared into the mirror wondering why I never saw myself in the people who raised me. Now I knew why, and I had answers, real ones. Not the comfortable lies wrapped in love and casseroles. The Walters, my true parents, were learning who I was. We were building something, not fast, not easy, but real. Cody hadn't written again, but that was okay. I had the letter. That was enough for now. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the window of my car. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch. I saw her, Grace, me, not lost. Not stolen. Just free. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. They had taken my name, my history, my truth, but I got it all back, and now, standing on the sidewalk of a house I once called home, I realized something else. They hadn't just lost me, they'd lost everything they built on a lie, and I was walking away with something they could never steal, myself. If this story moved you, made you question what family truly means, or reminded you of the strength that comes from reclaiming your truth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more real, raw, and powerful stories just like this one. And if you've ever carried a secret, or survived one, drop a comment below. Your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be heard.